What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today we got a reaction to the new Pornographers and their album Mass Romantic, brought to us by a friend, longtime supporter, and patron of the channel, Ian. Thank you, Ian. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons who make this thing go. If you'd like to support us in any way, check out that Patreon link below or the patron link on the end screen. We could not do it without them. Now, a couple months ago, I did Twin Cinema for the new Pornographers for Ian, and that was absolutely fantastic. But this album, Mass Romantic, is supposed to be kind of their magnum opus, even though it was their debut. So let's dive into a little bit about them and about the album. But first, Ian says, my favorite album by my favorite Canadian band and their debut from 2000. How can Mass Romantic be 20-something years old? Their first three albums were all top quality, so it's hard to choose between them. All 9 of the new Pornographers albums have had positive reviews, but they never broke through from the indie niche and had a hit, but their first 3 albums deserve to sell. Such a shame they haven't had greater exposure in the mainstream, and they have brought so much joy to me. So that's what Ian had to say. Just a little bit about the new Pornographers and then about the album. New Pornographers feature the talents of Zumpano's Carl Newman, John Collins of The Evaporators, Dan Behar of Destroyer, Limblifter's Kurt Dale, filmmaker Blaine Thurier, and of course, country's Nico Case. Mass Romantic's a debut studio album produced by David Carswell and band bassist John Collins. It was released on Mint Records on November 28, 2000. The album was 3 years in the making, with musicians A.C. Newman, or Carl, and Dan Behar writing songs as early as 1998. It failed to chart in Canada or the US, but the group had a sold-out tour due to very positive reviews. It received a score of 78 from Metacritic, which is sky high. Charted in several best of the year lists from various critics. Pitchfork named it the 9th best album in 2001. They later placed it at 91 on their list of 200 albums of the 2000. And Village and Voice in their critics poll, and they're a very, very difficult grader. They put them at number 17. All songs are written and sung by Carl Newman, unless I note otherwise. If you haven't been on this before, the music will not be in the video, but it'll be at a Vimeo link below. So click on that and follow along with us. Let's kick it off with the album opener and the title track, Mass Romantic. Kicks off, and so Ian talks about every song, right? I love it. He gives a grade too. He said the album kicks off by kicking you in the face with a noisy lo-fi production, echoey bass, multi-layered vocals, multi-part song with change of pace, change of lead vocals, energetic keyboard, and smattering of French lyrics. It's close to my ideal song, Ian says. Great start to the album, really leaves you feel energized. Almost a 10. He gives it a 9.5 out of 10. And I found a wonderful article. There's a lot of good stuff actually on this album, considering it was never a huge hit. But Stereo Gum did a 20 years later retrospective on this album, and they interviewed Carl Newman for every song. So I won't give you everything on every song. I'm actually going to link that article down below in the description. If you like this album, if you like the new Pornographers, go give it a read. It gives you some real insight. But he said on the ending of this song, and when they were mixing it, John and I just thought, it sounds clumsy. It just sounds like we tacked another part onto the end of the song. So we thought, how can we make it work? So we inserted, I think, about 8 bars, and I just played an unplugged electric and sang it into the talkback mic. It was almost as if I had recorded it on a Zoom call, which of course didn't exist back then. We got vocals on this one from Nico and Carl. I'm gonna have the lyrics up as always. Thanks again, Ian. Mass Romantic, the title track, one of those songs that, even though it's 4 minutes long, it seems like it's 2 minutes long, right? The guitar work on there is fantastic. Nico's vocals, I mean, the song subject itself is pretty cool too. I think it's about a guy who's a poser, right? Talks about him with his foster grants and his books on tape, boys and girls. That's how we used to do it in the days before streaming. So he's not really a well-read man. He just does the books on tape, but he wants to appear that way. So he wants to appear cool, even though he's really not. He's just looking for that romantic interest that he can't find. But we got to remember, this is their first song on the first album. So this is the very first thing you hear from them. I don't know if it's their peak. I obviously don't know their catalog. I only know the one album that I did, Twin Cinema, but it has to be up there with their peak. And Carl actually realized that, because another thing he says it's got that shuffle beat, that ka-chunka guitar, the weird little synth lines, the run-on sentence melody, which was odd, right? It's hard to describe to somebody if they didn't listen to it. Coming out of the gate, first song, first album, it's like a declaration of intent. And it was exactly that. Only now, over 20 years later, do I realize that we had something kind of special there. And that's kind of life, right? We don't realize what's special while we're in it. Next up, we have the fake headlines. Ian says, starting, I wrote the news today. Gives me a day in the life chills. One of the greatest songs of all time by the Beatles. chills, but sadly, it's not quite to that quality. Not much is, though, right? Interesting song in today's world of social media where we all write our own news, an 8 out of 10. Newman says this was another one where I played an unplugged electric through the talkback mic. That was the intro to this song. The fake headlines. I think that song's great, man. It has some of the least amount of streams on there. The guitar work on here is fantastic. And then when the chorus comes in, I don't know what that instrument is. And unfortunately, while we do have musicianship credits for the entire album, it is not identified out track by track because probably it was their debut. And obviously they weren't well known and no one probably wrote it down. So we just kind of got this smorgasbord, especially for Dan, multi-instrumentalist. So he could be playing anything. He was playing the guitar on this. But the fake headlines, back when this album was written, newspapers were a huge thing. And they were for 150 years to where they held the most esteem in the world as far as where you got your news. You trusted it more from a newspaper than the TV or anywhere else. But in the world we live in now, a former president of the United States, where I'm from in the United States, and maybe a future president of the United States, the fake headlines have become such a catchword, right? Fake media, fake news headlines, and it's really too bad. But this song kind of takes on a different connotation now in 2024 than it did in 2000, but a really good song. Except the third track, The Slow Descent into Alcoholism. Ian says a more serious song, few good licks, nice backing vocals, and a catchy chorus. Salvation Holdout Central. 8.5 out of 10. The article with the interview with Carl, autobiographical or nah was the question. Carl says, yeah, very much. Again, I wasn't overly concerned with the narrative, although the song title tells you about 75% of what you need to know. I was thinking about the facts that there are so many sad songs about alcoholism. Obviously, it destroys people's lives and causes anxiety, despair, depression, so much sorrow. But I also thought so many good things in my life came from being drunk because it just kind of loosened me up. I think that's why people drink. When you're a shy person, you have a few drinks and all of a sudden it's like, wow, I'm funnier. I'm more charming. It's basically a song about that dichotomy, that it can be such a horrible thing. But hey, there's no denying there's some fun to be had there. So I thought I would write this kind of fun, sad song. Yeah, I'm doomed, but I'm having fun, which was like Salvation Holdout Central. It was like when am I going to save myself? Well, not today. Now I feel a little guilty about it because I wasn't trying to glamorize it. But again, I didn't know anybody was listening. It just was what it was. The Slow Descent into Alcoholism. This album's 3 for 3, and this song was fantastic. The instrumentation on here and just the sound is very distinct, man. I can't imagine throwing this thing on in 2000, this being the first 3 songs you're hit with. This one had a false ending, just like the song before with the fake headlines. But Nico comes in here a little bit on the backing vocals. They talked about how they couldn't get her there for it because she had her own career, right? She had already released albums on her own, so they couldn't get her there in the studio every day. They'd have her for one day at a time, so they really maximize her time. So she's not on every one of these tracks, even on backings, but she was in there, and I thought it added a nice thing to it. And it's one of those songs that has that dichotomy, right, of the lyrics when you read them. I mean, they're not super serious, even though they're about descending into alcoholism, but I mean, it's a serious subject. But the arrangement is so bouncy, so awesome, right? And even when they jump into the chorus, the way they accentuate every word with the way the drumming changes up and the guitar work, it just sticks in your head. But really good song. Next up, we have Mystery Hours. Ian says, not entirely sure what this song is about. Delivered with feeling and the drums work pretty well. Doesn't quite do it for me. Gives it a 7 out of 10. Mystery Hours. Much like Ian, I really have no idea what it's about. It is a very interesting song. It starts off with those guitars, and you could have told me this song was from 1977, and then the synthesizer comes in, and then the Moog synthesizer is everywhere as well. But then as the song progresses, the synths become stronger, and you convinced me this would fit in about 1981. So much energy. So while I didn't love this song, the energy and the instrumentation, as it has been for the arrangement of these first 4 songs, is absolutely fantastic, man. It just kind of propels you through this song. Next up, we got the 5th track, Jackie, which this one was written by Dan, and this one is sung by Dan. Ian says, a pleasant enough song asking for people to work towards a better world. Like the sentiment, but the song doesn't grab me. 7 out of 10. All right, Jackie. Not really sure what this one is about either, but visualize success, but don't believe your eyes. There's a world of wisdom and pain to despise. When people get paid just to set you straight, it means, are you going to start the sunshine? And then that's the chorus. And then there's, a call and response. Who is going to stop the sunshine? Visualize success, but don't believe your eyes. What is a version of the world without the will to despise it? When people get paid just to set you straight, it means and then that Jackie, hey Jackie. So I thought Dan sounded really well on this one. It was well arranged. It's not going to end up on my favorites, but it's good. Next up, we have Letter from an Occupant. Nico's going to be singing this one. Ian says, just when you started to worry that this was only going to be a good debut, we get another belter. Nico gives it absolutely everything here, and the energy is maintained throughout the song. Nice little video too, which we are going to watch. Missed opportunity and regrets seem the focus of the song, but listening to the song, the powerful delivery of the vocals, leaves me feeling full of life and passion. A 9.5 out of 10. And then that interview with Carl, the question was, when first hearing about the new Pornographers, I remember this being the single, the song you've got to hear. Did you identify this one early on as a single or a standout track? Carl said, no, not at all. We had that 4-song demo and I gave it to people. I sent it to Sub Pop because Newman's previous band, Zumpano, was on Sub Pop, and I never heard back from them. And I sent it to my friend Niles. He was at Matador, but I met him when he was at Sub Pop. So I sent it to them and never really heard back. Although years later, Niles would tell me that they listened to it, but it was a cassette and they didn't have a cassette set up in the office. So it was a big hassle to put on the new Pornographers demo. Nothing came of it. I sent it to the head of Sub Pop and I sent it to my friend at Matador and I sent it to some really tiny labels and nobody bit. I remember just being shocked, like, is it just me? A couple years later, everybody would be telling me what an amazing song Letter from an Occupant was, but yet it was there in the world and I was sending it to people and the response was like, oh, we got to sign these guys. But then into early 2000, this clothing store in Vancouver called The Good Jacket decided they were going to put out a benefit CD for, I think, the Vancouver Food Bank. And so they asked us to put a song on it. I thought, okay, how about this song, Letter from an Occupant? Nobody else wants it, so we gave it to them, and that was the first song. And it got quite a lot of attention. People went, who's this new band? And we called ourselves the New Pornographers and Nico, which was a cute way of referencing that classic band and also referencing the fact that Nico was singing it. All right, we're going to watch the video. All right, Letter from an Occupant. Nico sounded fantastic. Definitely an early 2000s, late 90s vibe on the video. Visual effects, vibrant colors, different locations. But it starts out and they're disappearing into the picture, right? And picture. But then as it comes to the close of the video, we're coming out of the picture back to live time. And then we come right back in to the picture where we came out of to start. So I thought that was really well done. Nico sounds fantastic. In the interview I was talking about, Carl said it was very much like a breakup song. It was kind of an FU song. It was written in sort of a circuitous way as an FU to a girlfriend. For the love of a God, you sang, not a letter from an occupant. Like trying to say, you didn't just like the fact that I was a human. You couldn't deal with the fact that I was flawed. So F you. Oh, I mean, can't say it much better than that. All right, start the second half of the album with Two Wild Homes. The harmonizations and ending bumps this song up to an 8 out of 10 for Ian. Writers were Dan and Carl on this, and we got Dan, Carl, and Nico on vocals. Another energetic driving song. This is definitely a guitar song, at least the first 2/3 of it, but catchy. I mean, it's not a standout because there's some real standout songs on here. It's one of those songs that if it was on a different album, it might stand out more, right? Because there's so much great music on this album. Still really good, but it might stand out more on a different album. Next up, we have The Body Says No. Ian says, enjoy the drums on this track. I'm not a lyrics guy, but this is a complicated song, exploring desires versus others' expectations. That's always a complicated subject, isn't it? Ian gives it an 8 out of 10. The Body Says No. The longer that song went on, the more I liked it. The energy in it and the driving energy of it, which you have on a lot of these things. The multi-layering of vocals on here, like the production on this album is fantastic, especially considering it's a debut by a, quote, unknown band. But another song that would have fit time period, I don't know, man. Could have fit in the 80s a little bit. Could have fit in the early 90s, but really well done. I'll get to an ominous title, Execution Day. Dan's the writer, and we got Dan and Carl on the vocals. A slightly discordant start, Ian says, but this song stumbles around, changing tempo, and seems to be pretty good until about the 125 mark when the glorious chorus kicks in, a 9 out of 10. In that interview, Carl said, I think it was the first song where we nailed the Pornographers outro. You know, the way it just changes gears and changes into that. On this, mimics a guitar riff when he does it. When I was playing that guitar line, I was trying to do something like All the Young Dudes. You know, Mott the Hoople. The All the Young Dudes line was, and he mimics a different guitar riff. It was a different version of that. It was an example of things that I thought were obvious. Ian was spot on with how it changes up. It's almost like two separate songs by the way the tone and the arrangement and everything just changes. The back half of it on the chorus, the harmonies and stuff, it's almost Beatle-esque in that. So yeah, man, really well done. No song on here is boring. You know what I'm saying? Like, no song is monotonous. You'll get on albums, you know, and especially on a 12-track album where a song or two will be thrown there. So it's a little mundane. It's a little monotonous. Maybe the artist didn't go the extra mile in the arrangement because they're trying to get everything else done. You do not get that here. We got 3 songs left. We got Center for Holy Wars. Ian says another song I'm not clear on meaning of the lyrics for, but at least they spelled center correctly. He gives it an 8 out of 10. And I guess that's a typo there because they spelled center like centre. So it's not correct, says the American. I got an answer for you, though, on what this is about. I found it in that article in the Newman interview. They asked him, was this one topical at all? And Carl said, it became topical, but we finished it a year before 9/11. That's a weird thing about this record, like Center for Holy Wars and Fake Headlines. They all kind of feel like they were predicting the future of America, especially Center for Holy Wars. I read the lyrics and I think, if I wasn't writing about 9/11, what the hell is it about? So much of it feels like floating in the air at the Center for Holy Wars. I hope it never comes down again. It just feels like I was writing about 9/11 before it happened, but I wasn't. I don't know. Maybe I'm psychic. There's something about falling and floating that's always been in my subconscious, like Fake Headlines. The second verse is something about falling and floating. I don't know why that is. I might have to go to a therapist. I've seen in the research some people, like way retrospectively, try to assign this to being written about 9/11. Obviously, it came out a year beforehand, but as time goes on, those things kind of get lost, right? The little details and timing. Center for Holy Wars. Like a few of the songs on here, I didn't know what I thought of it when it started. The longer it went on, the more I liked it, and that is the mark of a great song. And really on this album, it is all about the arrangements and the harmonizations, right? The lyrics aren't that important. They really aren't, but interesting lyrics on this one, but a really good song. And when you got 12 songs on an album, right, you got to be careful how you arrange and sequence these, because what happens on a lot of albums, they upfront it because they know most people back then even didn't listen to the whole album. Now, in the days of streaming, you can see when you look at any album that it's usually, unless it's a hit song, the last several tracks have the least amount of streams because people just don't have the patience to get through and listen to the whole album. Listen to the whole album, people. You got to listen to the whole album sometimes. Trust me on this. All right, 2 songs left. We got the Mary Martin Show. Ian says, I had no idea who Mary Martin was until just Googling now and finding she was the mother of Larry Hagman and presenter of variety shows. Another energetic song with some nice sax and rolling organ, an 8 out of 10. I found that Mary Martin was an American actress and singer, a muse of Rodgers and Hammerstein. She originated many leading roles on stage over her career, including Nellie Forbush in the South Pacific in 1949, the title character in Peter Pan in 1954, and Maria von Trapp in The Sound of Music in 1959. Some heavy-hitting stuff. She's also named a Kennedy Center honoree in 1989. That's a huge honor. Newman said about this song, that was the final song on the record. That one felt pretty tossed together to me. I feel like we recorded it very quickly. I'm not sure anybody else sang backup on it. If there's any backups, I think it's just me singing with myself. We brought in this guy named Davidian Chorley, what a name, to play saxophone. I guess I got it in my head, I want a saxophone on a song. We're getting to the end of the record, and I thought, how about this new one? I remember when I was writing this one, I really loved the melody. There's that part where it goes to aim far too low. When I was writing that, I remember thinking, this is the best melody I have ever written. Then they asked him, what got you thinking about Mary Martin? And he said, I think it was about a girl I knew, kind of a pixie-ish girl. I don't remember. It didn't matter. So when I read that, I'm wondering if we're taking something of the Mary Martin, it's not really there. I mean, was it really not about that Mary Martin? I don't know. Maybe I'll know when I see the lyrics. The Mary Martin Show. Well, of course, it was about Mary Martin, so I don't have to worry about that. It was all about referencing those times, right? So, you know, this song had to work harder than any of the others to grow on me. It eventually did. It's my least favorite song on here, but it did eventually grow on me. That saxophone, as it became bigger in the mix as the song went on, it was kind of faded in the back and started, and the drumming kicked it. Like it did get there. It did get there for me. We're up to the last track, Breaking the Law, written by Dan, sung by Dan and Carl. It says an okay ending to the album, few nice samples, including a gong. Not the perfect ending, but not bad. 7.5 out of 10. Carl had a few things to say about this. He said, this was taken from Destroyer's first album, We'll Build Them a Golden Bridge. The group vocals at the end of Breaking the Law are credited to the Camp North Star Kids chorus, a reference to the Canadian comedy film Meatballs. It's a Bill Murray classic way back in the day. The chorus is actually every member of the band singing. Newman stated, I like the fact that people think it's a kids group. We made ourselves sound like a giant group, but we ended up sounding like little kids. I love the fact that in the Rolling Stone review, they mentioned the chorus of the kids. I just think it's great that people actually believe that because it's such an effing ridiculous thing for a band to do. I thought that was great. He also said Breaking the Law might have been the song that kind of put the Pornographers together. I remember it was on the First Destroyer record, and I saw him play it around that time, talking about Dan, around 96 or 97. And he did that song. I had this sense that I'd never seen a friend of mine play such a good song. Because everybody sees their friends play, and you're like, my friend's band is cool. I like my friend's band. This is the first time I thought, this is world class. Some of what Dan's doing is absolutely world class. I think it got into my head that maybe I should do something with him because he's really good. And of course, that song might have been the first song on the list. Like, okay, we're going to do Breaking the Law. That might have been the one song, it might have been song one for the new Pornographers. All right, Breaking the Law. The childlike chorus and switch up at the end saved it for me. I don't know the last time I've heard an album where the first third to half of a song, I thought it was kind of mid, and then it rescued the song. I thought it was a good to a really good song by the time it was over. There's like 4 or 5, maybe even 6 songs on here that are like that for me. You just don't see that. I thought it was a fine way to end the album. Definitely not one of the strongest tracks on here. That's going to segue me into those songs that I really, really like. Honorable mention, Execution Day. Faves are going to be Mass Romantic, The Fake Headlines, The Slow Descent into Alcoholism, and Letter from an Occupant. Before we get my final thoughts, let's get to Ian's. He says this album just edges out Twin Cinema for me, though Electric Version, which is the second album in between those two albums, isn't far behind. Even though the latter sounds better produced, in my view, other reviews say the opposite, so what do I know? The sheer energy and beauty of Execution Day, Mass Romantic, and Letter from an Occupant make this a killer debut album. Overall, I'd give this an 8.5. Now we're going to get to my final score. This album is really good. To consider it's a debut, and like the first 3 songs are absolutely just bangers, man. They are fantastic. But the whole album is good. It's very consistent. The arrangement on it, the instrumentation is what really, really hammers this thing on. The harmonies. It's just, like I said, so well produced for a debut. But I mean, it wasn't like these were new artists, right? It's a new artist, but these guys are professionals. They've been around for a while. So, you know, that explains a lot of why this album is so cohesive and so well done. I, too, am going to be at an 8.5. Now, I don't want to spoil the review for you if you haven't watched it yet, but it's also at an 8.5 on Twin Cinema. I'm going to differ from Ian here, and I'm going to tell you that Twin Cinema is a better album than this, even though I gave them both the same score, if that makes sense, because I'm not going to go like 8.49. I'm not going to do that stuff. I go 0.25s is the way I grade. However you want to grade, more power to you. They're both 8.5s. I think Twin Cinema is better, and I would stand on that. However, I've heard both these albums once, so I'm really not the one to ask. If you've listened to them multiple times, that definitely changes how an album hits with you. But let me know what you think below. What are your favorite tracks on this? What do you think of this album? Is this their best album? Is it Twin Cinema? I've never heard Electric Version. Maybe it's that. I don't know. But let me know your thoughts down below. If you haven't already, give us a thumbs up. Hit that big red subscribe button. And check out the link down below for our Facebook group. Great music discussion there every single day. Thanks again to Ian. And until next time, guys, I will see you.